sufficient proof of it. I finally reached the Anglo-American side, although I never expected that would happen under such unusual and strange circumstances. We were directed off the road near the town of Vetrin for military open fields, for civilian, an old monastery complex. For the time being, we had protection and modest meals. The arrival of special British personnel was a good sign. I would put first John Corselis, who showed sincere concern for our well-being. 2 British nurses also brought new ray of hope. There were signs, however, that our relationship with British was not what we expected. Therefore, the news that the troops and civilians of all nations, except Germans, will be transferred to camps in Italy came as a welcome relief. The camps in Italy were more ready to absorb a large number of people, access to supplies was easier, and semi-adequate accommodations were already in place. The British Celotes Command decided to move Serbs first. 2,500 soldiers and some of their followers, including a few children, departed with May 24th. Only 5 days after British and Yugoslav authorities reached an agreement that Yugoslav troops leave Austria and Carinthia. The first Slovene transport, 2,500 men and a few civilians, departed on Sunday, May 27th. The home defense men were told more than once that their destination was Italy. On Monday and Tuesday, May 28, 29, the same procedure was repeated. By then, dark shadows started creeping in regarding British honesty. 3 sub-officers from the first transport returned to Vetrin to tell the Slovene command that they were taken to Yugoslavia instead of Italy and told about executions. These officers were not believed. Nobody believed that British would do such a thing or that the Yugoslavs would just massacre these people. We also knew that Ustashi and other Croatians approaching Austria at Pliberk were never accepted by the British but forced back to Yugoslavia. The night before Cyril's departure, we spent half an hour together. All those rumors he told me about troops being returned to Yugoslavia were just that, rumors. However, that meeting was not the usual conversation between us, who were always very close. Our inner feelings were strange, unreal, but neither of us revealed those feelings. Several minutes before 11 a.m., I went to see Cyril and suggested that he leave the column and that we, Sister Maria included, would depart later with civilians. Those around him chimed in, saying that there was no reason for any fear. Cyril then rejoined the column. It was exactly 11 a.m. when I was standing on that field and waving to my brother, not knowing that it was for the last time. At 3 p.m. that same day, only 4 hours later, it became known that the British were in fact delivering the home defense troops to Yugoslavia. This transfer was done in a most treacherous, cruel and brutal manner. The news was brought back to Slovene authorities by the Slovene doctor, Janez Janeš. Indescribable sorrow and agony came over those still in the camp. Half dazed, I walked around the camp and heard desperate cries and prayers at every step. The British order, however, stood firm for May 31st transport. The groups were now told what was happening. I could not believe that so many were still willing to follow. The words we heard were, "Where the others have gone, we should go, no matter what happens." At 11 a.m., this last group departed. There were approximately 6,000 civilians left in the camp. The order came that civilians be removed the next day. The civilian camp, however, was under the command of Major Paul Berry, a Canadian. When Major Berry heard from the camp's civilian representative, Dr. Valentin Merschol, what happened, he could not believe it and was visibly shaken, as Dr. Merschol reported later. He immediately agreed to take Dr. Merschol to the British Celote's command. Dr. Merschol's visit to the British command and Major Berry's firm stand on behalf of civilian refugees prevented forced repatriation of civilians at the very last moment. The visit to Vitrin camp of the Supreme Commander of Allied Forces in the Mediterranean, Field Marshal Alexander, took place June 4th. Field Marshal arrived accompanied by Major Berry, 2 British nurses, and a few officers. In the middle of the camp, he briefly talked to Dr. Valentin Merschol. We became aware that Field Marshal gave his word that no Yugoslavs, military or civilian, will be returned by the British to Yugoslavia against their will. After a brief walk through the camp, Field Marshal Alexander left. Cyril's fate and the fate of others is still constantly on my mind. I do feel an obligation to tell what I have learned over many years, how terrible were the last days of the victims turned over to Yugoslavs by the British at Podrožca and Pliberk. I cite first what three British officers stated years later. Captain Ingle Nicholson, who was present on most of these occasions as witness and reporter, not in command, but a party to the accepted lie, he writes, "They were ferried by road from Victorin to 2 rural stations where they descended from the trucks and boarded a train of cattle wagons. For the officers, women and children, 2 battered carriages were attached at the rear. Our guardsmen slid together the doors and locked them. When all was secure, they drove back from the train and their places were immediately taken by the partisans who had been hiding in the bushes and station buildings. Through cracks, the Yugoslavs could see exactly what was happening. They began shouting imprecations, not to the partisans, but at us, who had betrayed them, lied to them, and sent at least a man among them to certain death. This scene was repeated day after day, twice a day. It was the most horrible experience of my life." Nicholson adds, "British troops have the utmost distaste in carrying out their orders." And the statement of Anthony Crosland, who was on the intelligence staff of the 6th Armored. "It was the most cold-blooded act of war I have ever taken part in." Also of Rabin Rose Price, who commanded the Welsh Guard Battalion, an order of most sinister duplicity. To know the fate of those returned to Yugoslavia, including the fate of Cyril, we have reports of 3 men who, by nothing less than a miracle, were able to escape at the last minute: France de Jac, Milan Zajec, and Francesco Zina.